All right. Welcome to another TezTalks radio episode. I'm happy to have Marissa True of TZ APAC co-hosting today's episode alongside myself, William McKenzie of Tesla's Commons. How's it going, Marissa?
It is not too bad. I think the world is slowly opening up. People are getting more vaccinated. So it looks like the beginning of the end in a very positive way. But are you also dealing with a heat wave out in the States?
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's quite as bad a little bit upper north from where I'm based at, but we've had temperatures, I think, around nearly 100 degrees here. And I recently dealt with a power outage, that lasted about 3 hours. So it's definitely been kind of a weird time, to say the least.
When one global crisis ends, another begins, I guess.
Right.
To put it morbidly. But in more positive news, it is technically Tezos' 3rd year anniversary. So happy birthday, Tezos. Yeah, small round of applause from our silent guests. But what would you say is... Thank you. Well, why am I saying thank you? As if I've achieved anything. But yeah, I would say that, this, in the 3 years, probably 2021 is when Tezos has really kind of kicked into gear and found its momentum with so many active projects happening. There's Formula One partnerships. There's so much going on. What are the key highlights for you, Will?
Yeah, I think when we really kind of look at this from a reflectionary standpoint, where we've come since Genesis Block, back in 2018, it's clear today that we're kind of really shooting towards penetrating, the mainstream culture. You brought up the Formula One racing and all the partnerships we've seen there with Red Bull Racing and obviously McLaren Racing. And, also, kind of the surge with NFTs and a lot of the platforms that have sprung up recently with Pick at Nunc, Calumet, and a couple of others. And, we're seeing a lot of that stuff manifest itself directly, in terms of on-chain metrics. I believe just a couple of days ago, or actually, I think yesterday, we hit a new contract call all-time high. We surpassed 2 million contract calls for the entirety of June. So, I mean, we're continually eclipsing all-time highs for contract calls, getting a lot more artists and, adoption within the NFT space and obviously other sectors as well. But we're obviously here to discuss NFTs. So,
yeah, I think that's the perfect segue into the conversation around how Tezos has really found its stride amongst the mainstream population, the mainstream audience, especially amongst artists, which is why today we've brought together a very special panel of 3 artists, 2 based out of Indonesia and 1 based out of Hong Kong. So we have today Ruanth Chrisley Thyssen, Diela Maharani, and Daniel Howe. I'm going to ask each of you to give us a quick introduction of who you are, what you do. Ruanth, why don't we start with you?
Hello, my name is Ruanth. I'm a sound designer / sound artist, and I come from the film world, and I've been in NFTs since 2017.
Diela, would you like to take it away?
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Diela Maharani. I'm an illustrator. I'm work as an illustrator for around 14 years now, and now I'm into NFT.
Great, thank you. And Dan?
Hi there. So I am a digital artist and an art professor. I currently teaching in Hong Kong. I'm originally from New York. And I work with technology, especially algorithms, to explore sort of dynamics of power in society, things like privacy and surveillance and disinformation and issues of representation. And most recently I did a bunch of sort of workshops with my students using NFTs, and that was an interesting experience that I can tell you more about later on.
Interesting. Appreciate all those introductions from you all, but maybe you all can just briefly share, what drew you all specifically towards NFTs as a part of, as comparative to the traditional, art space, and what was the decision with Tezos in particular?
I guess
Ruanth?
I can start.
Oh,
if
Okay.
you
sure.
want, or-
Sure, go ahead, Kosha.
So, as a teacher, I sort of believe that technology should enable artists to interact with the world, and specifically for student artists, it should enable them to have control over their work, to sell it if and as they want to, and to not have to get involved with exploitative middle men, and to be able to protect their work as well from being misappropriated or stolen or whatever. And these are all things that NFTs can help with. I've been interested in NFTs for some time now because of these reasons, but in the past I've resisted the urge to really get involved because of the devastating or arguably devastating environmental consequences of proof of work based blockchains. And that, I guess, that changed for me earlier this year when I became aware of the Hen platform, as you mentioned, here and now, or in Latin, hic et nunc,
Right.
and which of course runs on Tezos, and has very minimal environmental costs, and also importantly very low transaction costs. So I started thinking about how I could introduce this into my teaching, and sort of try to empower students to engage with this technology in a way that would enable them to potentially make some income off their work, as students and after they graduate, without giving up massive amounts of control.
Excellent. Ruanth, would you like to go next? Because I know you're very bullish on NFTs and Tezos in Indonesia in particular.
Maybe Diela, and then I'll go if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay.
Diela, would you like to share?
Well, basically the same with what Dan says. I like the Hikenang because it's on Tezos blockchain, and it's really environmental friendly than the other blockchain. So, and I choose NFT because I see like potential for my works to be getting more audience there, and also the community in Hikenang, and like that's why the reason I choose Hikenang and on Tezos blockchain.
Okay, I think that's basically like how it's easy access for artists, and it's easy to use, and like
Yeah.
it doesn't take you don't have to be too technically minded to get involved and understand its significance, right? But then Ruanth, like you like I said just a second ago, you're extremely bullish when it comes to NFTs. Like you as part of Art Moments Jakarta, you ran the detailed workshop on how to mint and sell NFTs on Tezos. So I just want to get a sense from you about, well, firstly, how you feel about it, and as well as what you think the general appetite there is for it, obviously outside of this room, because we've brought together 3 artists who are clearly very passionate about how they can NFTs can impact their work. But what about beyond?
So I've been into crypto since 2014 or 2015. And before getting into NFTs, I was one of those people who didn't care too much about the environment, Daniel, as you were mentioning. And I actually mined. So I was part of the whole proof of work ecos. And after 5 years of doing that, I realized there must be a better way. It took me 5 years, believe it or not. you know, so I I discovered Tezos. I believe it was in a clubhouse room, um, and immediately it was a Hicket Nunc auction. So they were auctioning each other's work, not auctioning because the auction feature wasn't there yet, but they were saying, "Hey, here's my work. Check it out. If you like it, please go buy it." And I just couldn't believe how cheap it was. To pay for the transaction fees there. And so that got me curious. And I guess it sped the process of what I believed NFTs could be. Because I don't see NFT just staying in art, but there's something wonderful about a transparent blockchain, So I thought it was very eye-opening to see that transactions could be that low. And then, of course, I read more into it. Um, but like you all mentioned, it's about authenticity and being able to track the work, if it's art, the NFT from its true origin, being able to see how much it cost the first time it was sold, why it would cost. These are things that never, from my short time in the art world, that never happen in the art world, because a lot of deals they don't get spoken of, and they don't say how much this artwork has been sold for, and if it was, we don't know who the collector is, or how they paid for it, or because a lot of people, when we talk about NFTs and crypto in general, the one of the first negative responses they give me is like, oh well, that's an easy way to money launder. Well, actually, it's a harder way to money launder because you can track every transaction and you can sort of see where it's headed. So no, it's
Definitely.
not easier actually, but yeah, I see NFTs as not just for art, but authenticating basically so many possibilities. Could be lands, anything that requires token or authenticity. I see huge potential in it, which is why I got into it super early. I see massive potential in games, and that was my first NFT collection, Crypto Kitties. That was a game essentially. I see games, I see art, I see updates in technology. But yeah, I think when I speak to the average art collector in when I've spoken in these museums, essentially what it comes down to, I think, what sells them is the transparency and authenticity of the piece, especially when it comes to digital work, because it's hard to, how do you say which of the digital work is real? When the physical
Mm.
work, that makes sense. You can say, oh, this is the real Picasso. When it comes to
Yeah.
digital work, you're like, how do you know it's real? Well, it doesn't matter. I have the certificate that proves that it's real here. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, definitely on that point. And actually, you brought up gaming. Speaking on gaming specifically, I believe Emergence from Interpop. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, Ruanth, but they're working on a digital collectible card game, and that's going to be based on Tezos. There's been a alpha testing and I believe a beta, and they're near launch. So that's supposed to be coming out pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to that. But also, you mentioned the ecological footprint, and I think that's very important. As we look at consensus, variants like proof of work, clearly there's a deterrent there, and you also accompany transaction costs, which are, both those two factors are a lot more beneficial within proof of stake, which obviously Tezos is based on. And I think in general, it's pretty refreshing to hear from all of you all that, kind of beyond some of these native biases that some of us, longer term crypto people have. Um, None of y'all are strictly, set bent on a single platform. You're just, looking at the pros and cons directly, as opposed to having a set bias, if you will.
Yeah, and I
personally-
think going. Sorry, go on.
Go ahead, Marissa. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, but going beyond basically the notion of like authenticity, and also when it comes to proof of stake chains, the lower ecological footprint that it has, bringing it back to artists in particular and digital artists, I want to understand how it's actually impacted your work and where you find the value beyond, selling it online and being able to kind of track or kind of get paid royalties for future sales and kind of always be connected to your piece. So Diela, as someone who's been in digital art for a long time, what's been the difference between when you first started selling your digital work and what it's like now when you kind of ventured into NFTs?
When in before NFT, I never sell my digital work because it's kind of confusing how to sell it. So I only took commission work based on brief and everything. So now with NFT, I can sell my personal works that I don't have to do brief and commission. So I just like put my works out there, and if you like it, you can, you can buy it or no get it. So the difference is, of course, so now I can really share my personal works and to be able to connect with directly with my collectors and build the community there, and making networking with so many artists, and I can collect their works also. That's now.
I think that's no, I think that's excellent. I think that's something people often underestimate is digital art wasn't really, I guess, if I think about it, it wasn't something you could easily sell unless it was commissioned. So to be able to put out what you've created, without a brief, and something that's very much just your artwork, and seeing people's interest in it must be quite gratifying and fulfilling as an artist.
Yes, it's really fulfilling, and it kind of raising my confidence in making art.
I think that's brilliant. I love that. So then, Dan, bringing it back to your role as a teacher in creative media, and as you mentioned before, that NFTs are something you're educating your students about. What are the key lessons that you're actually focusing on? Like, what do you think are the main things that they need to understand, and how do you think that that's going to impact this next generation of artists and creators?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think just following up from Delia's comment, I think that that exact confidence is one of the things I'm trying to instill in my students. The confidence to use a new platform to try and understand what's happening, not just in the interface, but sort of below the levels. Back into the blockchain, and we look at how those transactions are recorded in the blockchain rather than just looking at the hen interface. And also, as said, like in the past, for digital artists, it was often the only option was to sell prints, of a digital work. And in many cases, in fact, the digital art that I make and also find most interesting is work that is dynamic in ways that can't be captured in a static, in a print, say. And so the fact that on Hen you can make like interactive works where, user can do things and get different responses back from the work is pretty powerful. With that said, there are a lot of things that I also think are interesting, particularly interesting in digital art that one can't do on Hen yet, at least, or on, in some are difficult on blockchains in general. For example, integrating live data sources, right? So if I want to make a work that, reads in the pollution data or something from for that current moment, and then reacts to it in some way, that is difficult at least, and I think at least as of recently, it was not supported on hand. Hopefully there are still places we can expand that platform to include different different types of work that are take a bit more advantage of the specific affordances of algorithmic or computational art. Yeah.
Great. And bringing it, back from Hong Kong to Indonesia again, Diela and Ruanth, I want to ask you about what the NFT or the digital artist community is like in Indonesia. Like, is it finding its feet? Is it pretty well versed and everyone's sort of jumping in the pool and getting involved? And what sort of impact are we seeing? Because I think with Indonesia, it's generally seen as, an emerging market. It's not necessarily one people understand the mass and the potential of. So what's the activity like in the art scene?
Currently, we're growing. The community, lots of my friends who is digital artists and some of traditional artists are now curious about the NFT, and they're willing to learn more about the NFT, and they ask us, Ruan, me, and some of our friends in Metarupa, because we already jumped into the NFT, so they're we're sort of onboarding our fellow artists to join the NFT. And yeah, Ruan, if you want to add.
Well, I just want to add that, in a place like Indonesia, a lot of people don't have direct access to purchase crypto, let alone if that crypto, if it costs, I know $5 seems like little, but in a country like Indonesia, it's not easy to get, just to mint your first work. It's not easy to get those funds. What a blockchain like Tezos allows us to do is to tell these guys, hey, you can basically do the same thing. And, we educate them a bit on the blockchain. You can basically do the same thing for much cheaper here. So why wouldn't you? Because I think there's this false perspective of people valuing, in terms of NFT art, valuing one blockchain more than another. So, I always tell them it's about your work, it's about your art. And whatever value you have there, that's what's really going to sell. It doesn't matter so much the blockchain if you're talking about the art. And actually, if you could do something way more efficiently and way cheaper, why wouldn't you? So the example I always give is I come from the music world. I come from the film world, but before that, every sound person somehow usually has a correlation to music. And in the music world, you spend months, if not years, trying to create an album, and maybe years building up your band's name or your reputation's name. And it doesn't matter how big you get. At the end of the day, after you've spent so much capital on making this album and marketing it and going to your fans, you're gonna sell it for $10 or less, maybe $15 with some exclusive features. But that doesn't mean that your music is less valuable just because you're selling it for way cheaper than, let's say, traditional fine art. Now, I think now in the NFT space, we're seeing a lot of traditional artists and fine artists, and I think that's where this bias is coming from. They don't mind $200 transactions if they're purchasing an NFT that's $1,000 or $2,000. But I mean, when musicians enter the space, sound people, when gamers enter the space, we're not gonna pay $5 for transaction fees. That's as low as it gets. What I've seen, we're not gonna pay. I want to pay 20 cents for transaction fees. To me, that makes sense. And me selling my work for $10 or whatever the equivalent is in Tez doesn't mean that my work is less valuable. It just means it costs less. And that's not a bad thing. It could be just as valuable or even more valuable than the works we see in other blockchains that are selling for. So I just want to bring that point up because I believe in Indonesia, people are quick to follow trends and say, "Oh no, we have to go to this blockchain because that's where all the big collectors are, and that's where it's at."
Right.
It's not a good solution for someone, for example, in the music industry. It really isn't.
Yeah, and actually going off that, Ruanth, I noticed next to your name, maybe you'd like to share a bit more information about this, but could you tell us a bit more about Metarupa?
Yeah, so Metarupa is the collective we formed after we exhibitioned here. We were the first online offline exhibition in Indonesia to display NFTs through Art Moments Jakarta, where TZ APAC was a sponsor. And we're very grateful for the opportunity because for a month we've been displaying NFTs in well-known galleries across Indonesia, with of course following the COVID protocols and all. And we've had people come up, they would browse the entire gallery and then spend 10 minutes in our room, if not more, at least 10 minutes, talking about what is this? So is this digital art? No, this is crypto art. Oh, what's crypto art? So, we have that conversation, but it was fun to interact with people. So we realized that it's not, it's not as simple as, as people believe it to be. I mean, for us, it might be simple, but for a lot of the older generations and people who have never even touched crypto, it's not as simple. So we take the time and explain it to them there. But then we realize, hey, this isn't going to last. So we decided to form a collective called Metarupa. And right now it's 8 of us, and we're going to launch in 12 days, I believe, or 11 days on our website, where we help onboard people into the NFT space who want to mint.
So taking like a very proactive stance in actually growing the digital artist community that we were talking about. And if they're fairly new to the game, pointing out how straightforward it is, for example, running that workshop on minting and selling NFTs, it's a quick way to just exponentially build that out. We did touch on this earlier about like the concerns around the ethics of NFTs, whether it was in terms of pricing through gas fees or whether it was about sustainability. But Dan, you touched on a point about empowering artists, building their confidence and making them more connected to their work. So I wanted to get your views on how NFTs can basically prevent artist exploitation and where you see that coming into the game. Is that like at the forefront of one of the ethical standpoints of NFTs, or is it just, a side benefit?
It's an interesting question. I just wanted to comment, respond to the last question briefly, and just to say it was one of the most interesting thing about these, the work I did with the students was how much the community responded to them, and that wasn't necessarily the Hong Kong community, but more an international community of people doing digital arts. I think there's the Hong Kong community working with NFTs is actually vanishingly small at the moment. This is something else I'm working on also with TZ APAC to try and grow that community, and we'll be having a show mostly of student but also community artists that in Hong Kong in this coming year, and then hopefully that will perhaps tour elsewhere. I think that art, the question of appropriation and or misappropriation is a difficult one in the art world, right? So much art, appropriation is a valid and historically widely used technique in art practice, right? You reusing other people's work in new and interesting ways, whether it's from sampling or in visual art or whatever. So you certainly don't want to exclude that kind of, what in some jurisdictions is legal under fair use or whatever. At the same time, you also see people just being sort of clearly taken advantage of in their work, basically just sort of stolen and reused for whatever economic gain, which, is a very different thing. And so it's I think the conversations around that are super interesting and come up quite quickly with NFTs. But I'm not sure to the degree that NFTs actually solve that problem. And we've had cases already where people who aren't the artists publish NFTs, of someone else's work, and then start collecting. And there's a whole question of how you authenticate, off-chain, that the person putting up an NFT is actually the person who owns the work. But I think fascinating set of questions that working with this technology raises, and especially is great in the classroom, but even outside, to have these discussions and debates.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that. I think we can kind of shift this more towards everyone's thoughts here. When it comes to the remaining challenges that you all, I guess, see towards NFTs, whether that be on the adoption front or global perception, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Do you mind if I go first, Diela?
Yeah.
I think Daniel brings a good point, because in terms of adoption, for example, in Hen, I think it's very easy to get people on board, and then immediately the first thing they'll ask is, how do I change my profile? And
Right.
I think one of the reasons why we're not getting faster adoption yet, credits to Hen where it's due, because they're a new platform, and massive amounts of transactions per month, beating all the other platforms combined. Their verification process, it takes about a day or two, a day when I was doing it, and now I think 2 or even more days, because they're doing it manually, and I understand why. They just want to make sure that this is the person, that's they're claiming to be, through Twitter verification, through sending a small amount of tests for verifying purposes, verification purposes. So if they could somehow automate that, I think we would see a lot of, I don't know, faster, more adoption towards a platform like Hen. Not that people aren't adopting already. Like I said, they've had more transactions than any other platform, and they don't even have a search function yet. Last time I checked, So I think it's one of the problems I see in the NFT space that I know is going to be solved is just finding the right NFT, just finding the right artist and person, because we've got this wave of people, and in order to find them, you have to enter a community, and it could be weeks, maybe months before you find the person that you're looking for. There's no form of curation, where, hey, I like 2D art, let's go here, or I like 3D art, let's go here. It's just basically, here's the platform, okay, everyone's on it, how do I find people? And that's a really hard thing if it's not for word of mouth. So right now, it's all word of mouth. It's getting in the community and saying, hey, I love black and white work. Who does black and white work? Where can I find more black and white work? Or even as an artist saying, hey, this is my work, and if you guys are interested, just making that statement on a Clubhouse, on a Discord, the chances of you being found are very minimal. So I think that's why a lot of people, they quickly adapt, but they're like, I haven't made a sale yet, or I haven't been seen, no one's seen my work or made a bid on my work. It's because they're not being seen right now. But I think that problem's going to be solved very soon, personally speaking. But yeah, that's my biggest issue with NFTs right now, which is not really an issue. I think it'll be solved.
Yeah,
So it's basically that we're still stuck at like the foundational stage. We're still laying those foundations because at the end of the day, it is very early days. It's only really come into the fore this year, as it were, in terms of mainstream adoption to a level. Diela, but you were saying that you found that NFTs were a great way to be able to start profiling your work. So what's like, have you been struggling to find this traction, or how did you build your community out of your audience?
Before starting on minting my works on any platform, I kind of do research with jumping on Clubhouse and just getting to know with other artists and making friends on Twitter and networking, basically networking. And when I mint my work and uh, so it how do I get my sales? It's basically with the help of my Twitter followers and friends on how they really help me to to promote my works and I did the same too with the other artists, so we kind of help each other to promote each other works. That's how our works get in the in into recognized uh, and I think that will probably solve what Ruan says earlier.
yeah, definitely. Going back a little bit earlier to Ruanth's commentary, I definitely agree on the search function aspect with Nunc specifically. You know, for verification purposes, with some of these profiles, it actually looks like Tezos profiles will help in this regard. And I think they actually just released a cross-chain compatibility function, which can actually trace somebody's profile on, Nunc, but also on, different networks like Ethereum. So if someone was using Rarible or, OpenSea or what have you, and that you can actually trace all this on the same user. So I think that will be pretty neat to kind of see how that evolves as more people use that. What do you think, Ruanth?
Sorry, yeah. So I think that's really interesting because yeah, a lot of artists come in. We had a question yesterday from someone saying, should I learn crypto first or should I jump straight into NFTs? And while some people who have been interested in crypto, we understand that the blockchain is something you can read. That's the whole point. You can uh, follow these transactions. You can see how much these artists are uh, making or selling or minting. But a lot of NFT artists, they're only now discovering that there is such a utility as you mentioned. And they're like, oh, actually, this is something you can do with the blockchain because it is transparent. So this is what everyone's talking about. So I think it's interesting to see how that will evolve in the future as more people understand that the information's out there, and you just have to find the right tools in order to find. And I'm really interested to see that gap being bridged between talking about it and actually we're doing it. We're reading the blockchain. This is, go to the site to see the top 100 selling artists on Hen based on transaction, based on, those sites exists, and you can easily check it out. So
Yeah, I feel like a couple points there, or that I think because of the base level understanding around how NFTs work on a blockchain, there's almost this mentality of artists, or at least some artists that I've spoken to, feeling like they have to really pick which blockchain they want to mint their work on. And then once they've picked the blockchain, they're sort of fixed to it. So this idea of kind of building bridges or interoperability between blockchains is probably something that's going to change the game perceptibly on that front. But then I think when it comes to your point of, should you learn about blockchain first, or should you just get involved? It's almost like, do we really need to understand how the internet works before we start using it, right? Like there's plenty of products that are kind of built and ready to use. It's sort of a plug and play solution to remove that barrier to entry. So I think hopefully once people understand that, you don't need to be blockchain savvy or a crypto expert to get involved, it'll start becoming a more default way to interact online. But then this goes back to what Dan was talking about in terms of how what knowledge you impart on students and what level of understanding they need to really kind of get the key information that they need to operate this as, I guess, in a word, professionally as possible. So Dan, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, my teaching philosophy is based on this idea of transparency and being able to look inside technologies and figure out how they work. This is why I'm a long-time open source software advocate, and I teach my classes using only open source tools, and so so many of these of the new technologies and platform services are very much black boxed and are opaque to, if you want to know how Google works, like the search engine, like good luck, right? You can write a letter to Google and you'll get some boilerplate back. But so that process of going down through the levels, maybe from hen to to Tezos, to like how blockchains work at a technical level, the fact that you can see all those, if you know where to look and learn how they work and interact together is very empowering, I think, for students and for people in general. The more we can understand these technologies, the more we can envision alternatives and exercise our own agency in how we interact with them, which is just important, not just for artists, but just being a citizen in the world.
So I think this conversation's delved into the technical and the philosophical, and this also just generally the creative. But I wanted to end this panel and with a more forward-looking community building angle and ask each of you to recommend one of your favorite NFT artists for our audience to check out. So Diela, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So there's a lot of, I want to recommend my fellow artists, Indonesian digital artists. There's a lot of Indonesian digital artists. I like some of like my friends like Janavi, Ruanth, and Rimbawan Guerrilla, Rus. Their art are very distinctive between each other. So go check them out.
Great. And Ruanth?
My favorite artist, which I believe is highly still under the radar, is Jeffrey Onesta, and it's a bit biased because I know him, but he does. First time I saw his work, I thought it was a picture, and I thought, why are you selling a picture for thousands of dollars? And then I realized it was a painting. It was a digital painting, and I was like, wow, that is crazy. So check out Jeffrey Onesta. He's on Calamint and Hen as well.
Great. And Dan?
I'll redirect the question a bit and point attention towards works that engage the platform itself, if that makes sense. So I'm very interested in works that comment on or critique or expose the how the blockchain works itself, what's happening, works that investigate what's happening at the moment on various platforms, like how different works are selling, and that's integrated into the work itself. So that kind of work that is a bit self-reflexive. And I think one of the key things that we can do as artists and as teachers is to use these new technologies, but also to always be questioning about them and critical of them, and explore them not just as ways of doing things more effectively or efficiently, but think about what the ramifications are for society and the world.
Great. Well, thank you, Diela, Ruanth, Dan. This has been really insightful to get the artist's perspective on NFTs. And I hope everyone takes value out of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
That was great.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.